Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to Romance and Royalty. This is Moshiach Part 3. Now, we've spent a big part of the summer going through the personalities that make up and lead us to this thing called Moshiach, or the Messianic Era, this time in history where people sing about Mashiach, 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 we want Mashiach, we want Mashiach now. And we don't really have a clear idea of what it is. And the reason why I think it's important to have that conversation is because maybe if we go backwards, maybe once we understand what the Messianic concept is, we could use this idea and look back at the characters that we spoke about, these amazing people and their lives and the choices that they made. You know, some of them good, some of them poor, some of them better, but certainly all troubling and disturbing stories. Maybe if we could understand what this era is and what it's supposed to accomplish, we could understand a little bit better why these things had to unfold in the way that they did. So what I want to do with you today is try to kind of give you a glimpse as to what it is, what does the Messianic Era mean, who is this person, what are we supposed to be looking forward to, what do we believe in, does it all make sense? Let's try to get some clarity, and hopefully we'll walk away with a deeper understanding of what it is that we actually believe in. So this is from a book called Soul Searching by Rabbi Yaakov Astor, and he says as follows. It's something called Eschatology. Eschatology is specifically a study that deals with Olam Haba issues. Okay? Now, there are a total of 16 prophecies that are brought down in the books of Moshe and the prophets. 16 prophecies in total, of which 13 have already in the Tanakh. In Tanakh, 16 prophecies, 13 of which have already come to fruition. Okay, so what am I talking about? That have come to fruition, have come true already. Okay, so you have, for example, the fact that my wife's the only one that could call me in the middle of my shiur. So you have 13 that happened. Like, for example, we knew that the Jews were going to be exiled from Israel at the first temple. We knew that they'd come back. We knew that the temple would be destroyed. We knew it would be rebuilt. We have a whole set of 13. I don't want to go into that, but there are 3 that are left, and this is important for us. The 3 that are left are Kibbutz Goliot, which is the bringing back the Jews from the 4 corners of the earth. The Jews were scattered to the 4 corners of the planet, and that one of the prophecies that there's going to be a time before the Messianic Era that the Jews will come back to the land of Israel. Now again, like I've said this before, definitely I think worth repeating, that if I told you in 1930 that, and you were living in Germany, that Jews would come back to the land of Israel in 17 years, they would not believe me. Right? And not only that, they'd read the prophecy and say, this is nonsense, it's a lie, I'm not interested, there's no way it's happening, impossible. And all they had to do was wait another 17 years to see something that was spoken about 2,000 years ago becoming a reality. That the Jews were finally given the permission to go back and reclaim their homeland. That we turn a desert. When the British gave us the land of Israel, they thought that we'd be dead within 6 months because there was no water in the land of Israel. There was no way to aggregate the land, and land was a desert, it was arid, there was nothing you could do there, nothing would grow. And that in a short span of only 75 years, right, that Israel became the number 1 exporter of water in the Middle East. It's such a joke, every time I say it I laugh, that the Israelis figured out a way of turning seawater into drinkable water, and that there's more bottles of water in the Middle East that says made in Israel than there is in any other country in Israel. That's insane. That right now that the Israelis are figuring out ways of exporting all their produce because they're worth more to the neighbors than they are to the locals. This is insane stuff. This is miraculous. It doesn't make any sense. These are all miraculous things. And the fact that, I believe it was in 2007, was the first time in 2,000 years that more Jews were living in Israel than outside of Israel. First time. Since in 2,000 years. You understand what that is? That's crazy. That you have so much re-emerging. Now this is all amazing because we say this all the time. We speak about Uvnei Yerushalayim, the idea of rebuilding Jerusalem, of the people coming back, the Kibbutz Goliot. We talk about these things, and we're watching it come to fruition. So this is amazing. So we have the 14th, the 15th, the 16th. So you have the return of the Jews to the land of Israel. You have the building of the third temple, reestablishing the third temple, which is also not so crazy, even though so much of the issues right now in Israel sound impossible. Anytime there's any march on the Temple Mount, there's all kinds of protests, which makes sense because we're getting closer. If there was no protests, I'd be suspicious. But the fact that the people are protesting our approach to this space means there's something of value there. They also know it. They're not stupid, right? There's something there for us, and maybe not right now, because the only way to build a temple is through peace. Peaceful means, which means the locals in Israel, all the locals would have to agree that this is what they want to do. It can't come through contentious, fighting means. It has to come through peaceful means. And last but not least is the resurrection of the dead. These are the three things that have to happen for the 16 prophecies to come true. Now, I think all these things are very doable. And even when you think about the resurrection of the dead, it sounds so crazy. Even saying it sounds somewhat sci-fi-y. It sounds so intangible. But it's not so crazy. There's something called the Human Longevity Project today, where they're talking about, life extensions. We're talking about, they did this experiment, I think about a month ago, where they took dead pigs and brought them back to life. We're talking about crazy stuff that's happening from a technological perspective. And R.A. Kaplan, who is one of my favorite Jewish authors, wrote in 1982 that the resurrection of the dead does not have to be a man waving a wand and pulling people out of the ground. It could just simply be the technology to pull people out of the ground, like the science to do it. And so how would you do it? So some people, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but there's a minhag that many of us have on Saturday night when we're doing Havdalah. You'll see that people dip their pinkies into the wine and they'll put it over here behind their neck. And then, of course, your pocket, you put over here, you put over here, you put it over there, you put it wherever you can find, you put it in all kinds of places, right? The real custom of doing this, of this and this, is not on your neck because you're trying to put, you're not putting perfume on the back of your neck that smells like wine. You're supposed to be touching the collar, the top of your bone, which is the top of your spine, this big bone that sits at the bottom of your neck, right where your neck and your back meet. That bone is called the luz bone. Okay, that bone is the most dense bone that you have in your body. It's almost impossible, it's almost indestructible. You know that bone is stronger than iron when you actually compare the two together? Okay, so this bone is the last possible bone to decompose. It's almost impossible for it to decompose, which means that in your bone, and everyone who ever died, we have their DNA in their luz bones. Right? So which means if I know where someone is buried, I could literally go to their burial place and dig up their remains, find their luz bone or any other bone there and extract their DNA, and I could bring them back. I'm not saying that has to happen that way. I'm just saying that that even that statement would have sounded absurd 10 years ago, and it's becoming more and more of a reality in our lifetimes. Okay, so we're talking about these things that are happening. We're seeing them emerge. These are things that were pronounced by our prophets 2,000 years ago, and we're watching them become a reality today. So he says as follows: the word eschatology is defined in the dictionary as a branch of theology concerned with the final events of the history of the world. The truth is that eschatology is not exclusively the domain of a religion. The most striking example of secular eschatology would be Marxism, believe it or not. The convulsions, the agonies of the class war, its evils resolving themselves into the classless society, the withering of the state, and its blissful existence ever after. So Jewish eschatology is made up of three basic pieces. One, the era of Moshiach, the afterlife, and the world of resurrection. These are the three principal things that eschatology deals with. You take a class of eschatology, these are the three areas that you're going to be focusing on your study. So the Moshiach, according to traditional Jewish sources, will be a human being born of flesh and blood, mother and father, unlike the Christian idea that he is the Son of God, conceived immaculately. Which is interesting because if Jesus was in fact conceived through immaculate conception, halachically he cannot be a Mashiach. Why? From a Jewish perspective, can't he be Mashiach? And the answer is that in order for Mashiach to be Mashiach, he has to be someone that comes from the house of David. Baruch atah Adonai melech haolam she'akol niyeh b'dvaro. Which means that he had to have had a father who was a descendant of King David. But if the Messiah's father was God, then he does not have a claim to the Davidic line. And therefore he cannot be a descendant of King David, and therefore he cannot be the Mashiach. So the idea that Jesus was born through an immaculate conception is absurd, from a Jewish perspective, of course. Right? There's no way that he could have been the Messiah, because if his father was God, he's not from the house of David, and therefore you're not the Moshiach. Okay, there's lots of other reasons for it, but anyway, when they asked this question to the church in 1978, they got a response back that said that, well, we don't believe it's literal immaculate conception. We obviously believe he had a father, and his father was a descendant of King David. Just changing the story a little bit. All right, so he says as follows. He says that Maimonides writes that the Messiah will complete his job and then die like everyone else. Okay, so we're not talking about a man who was born and lives forever. We're talking about a state, a time where an individual, a human being, flesh and blood, achieves all kinds of amazing things in terms of science, technology, politics, and so on and so forth. What is his job? His job is to end the agony of history and usher in a new era of bliss for humanity at large. When we're talking about the Messianic Era, we're talking about a state of bliss for humanity. Well, what does that look like? The time period in which emerges and completes its task is called Messianic Era. The afterlife. The afterlife proper is called in traditional sources Olam Haba, or the world to come. However, the same term, Olam Haba, is also used to refer to the renewed utopian world of the future, the world of resurrection. The Olam HaTichya, or as explained in the next paragraph, right? The former is the place of righteous souls who go after the death. So you have something called the Gan Eden as the storage place for the neshamot, and Olam Haba is not where the souls are, but Olam Haba is a physical place. It's tangible. It's here on earth, where humanity is living in an era where they are able to experience a level of clarity. And this clarity brings bliss. Now, what do I mean by clarity? And what do I mean by bliss? Okay, I'm going to say this, and I'm happy for you to challenge me. Most suffering comes as a result of not knowing why. But if I could explain to you and share with you why you're suffering and why you went through the things that you went through, it's no longer suffering. Think about that. Okay, think about it. I'm not saying that you could go ahead and erase pain, but if there is a way to explain where you are able to get to a place where you understand exactly why you went through what you went through, it's no longer suffering. It changes into something different. Why is where most of us suffer. We don't understand why we're going, why me? It's not fair. We're comparing, contrasting. But when we understand, we have that intellectual clarity as to why I am where I am and why I went through what I went through, or why that person to go through what they went through, your suffering changes to something else. So the former is a place where the righteous souls go after death, and they have been going there since the first death, because we believe in reincarnation. That place is also sometimes called the world of souls. It's a place where souls exist in this embodied state, enjoying the pleasure of closeness to God. The world of resurrection, by contrast, no eye has seen, Talmud remarks. It's a world, according to most authorities, where the body and the soul are reunited to live. Turning the page. Anyone listening, if you ever want any of the sources, just email me. Eternally in a truly perfected state. That world will only first come to being after the Moshiach, and will be initiated by an event known as the Great Day of Judgment, or Yom Hadin Hagadol, which is actually happening for us. The miniature Yom Hadin Hagadol is happening on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. This time of the world going through its state of judgment. The world of resurrection is thus the ultimate reward, a place where the body becomes eternal and spiritual, while the soul becomes even more so. So what's he talking about? When you wake up in the morning, do you have a hard time getting out of bed? Do you feel sluggish and lazy? Do you often say to yourself, why now? Why today? Can I get more time? Can I sleep more? Do you feel unmotivated? All those expressions of lack of interest are coming from your body's desire to remain more earthly. However, when you hear that other voice inside of you that says, hey, you have so much to do today, get out of bed, stop being lazy, you got to accomplish, you got to build, you got to create, you're a soul, you have so much to do, that's coming from your higher consciousness called your neshama, your soul. So there's a dichotomy in each of us. There's a split personality we have. On the one part, we recognize that we are, spiritual, but on the other part, we have another identity called the body. And this split creates a level of schizophrenia in each of us. Okay? Now, so it depends on what you identify with. Do you identify more with being a body than a soul, or a soul than a body? If you identify, that's a question, right? It sounds like a question. Here she calls me again.
Can I just surreal?
Yes, going back.
Things that the Jews got, Eretz Israel,
Yes, correct.
and Limud Torah and Surreal.
Yes.
So this is also part of Moshiach, no?
Yeah, it is part of it. That's why we merit it. We merit all those things. The suffering, the Limud Torah, and Israel was all part of the same thing. Limud Torah is not easy.
Exactly.
It's not. It's supposed to be a tircha. It's supposed to be burdensome on purpose, and that tircha, that's the work that we go through to be able to merit the land of Israel.
Where does it say? Limud Torah.
Where is that? It's a Gemara. I don't remember the exact source. I'll find it for you if you need it. I can get you the source. I don't know exactly where it is. So was that a statement or a question?
No, I was just.
You're making a statement. Yes, this is true. This is true. This is all true. But it's for going back for a second. How do you identify? Do you identify more with being a body or a soul? And so if you identify more with being a body, then waking up in the morning becomes very difficult, right? Because I don't want to get up. I want to take care of my body. I need more sleep. I need more rest. I'm always lacking there. But if you identify more with your soul, then there's infinite amount of opportunity every single day for you to take on advantage of whatever the day is going to present for you. That has to do with you. Do you live a life of growth? Are you thinking more spiritually about what you can do to be a greater human being? How are you working on your midot? How are you working on becoming more humble? How are you doing more chesed? How are you working on improving your tefillah? How are you making sure that this year will not be a repeat of last year? Because if you're not doing anything, if you're not proactively working on something to overcome something, then you could be confident it'll be a repeat of whatever happened last year. I'm confident of that. That if there's no proactive action on your part to do something that forces you to grow, you should assume that you'll have the same results this coming year. But Rosh Hashanah is a time where we're supposed to ask the question, what do we want the year to look like? How are we growing? How are we developing a bigger, better part of ourselves? Are we using our Rosh this Hashanah, this year? Are we using our mind this year to grow, to become something more? Right? Chachamim say it's called Rosh Hashanah and not Hatchalat Hashanah, not Reshit Hashanah. It's called Rosh Hashanah to remind you that it's all activated in the head, with your mind. Your mind determines. Sof Maseh Machshavat Chila. The end of your actions, I could determine that will determine, tell me very clearly what you were thinking in the beginning. If you weren't thinking, you'll end up exactly where you are right now. But if you're thinking and you have a vision, a goal, you're thinking more clearly about where you want to go, you want to change, you want more from the world, then the only way to do that is by creating a vision and a plan that helps you get there. And if you don't have a vision, you're not going anywhere. So this world of resurrection and Moshiach, the world of Olam Haba, is a state where we reach a level of clarity and bliss. There's no more of this dichotomy between body and soul. Imagine living in a world where the goof, the body, is completely aligned with the ratzon of the neshama, with the will of the soul. Imagine that for a minute. What would you accomplish? Everything. Right? It's so beautiful. You have no more of that contrast. But at the same time, when this does happen, you'll also have tremendous amount of regret. And the reason why you will have regret is because you will lose a level of your free will. And therefore, the reward that you will have will be somewhat muted versus the reward you have for doing it right now. Because right now, there's a greater challenge, there's a greater contrast between the body and the soul, the ability to grow and get reward is 1,000-fold greater than anything that you could do when your body and soul are completely aligned. Why? You have to remember that God creates a world of perfection. I had a philosophy teacher who once told me, he's like, if you believe that God is perfect, then you believe everything God creates is perfect. And if everything God creates is perfect, right, then even this world that we should be perfect. But since it's not perfect, right, therefore God's not perfect. And since this is the philosophical conclusion he came to. So I raised my hand. I said, Professor, I disagree. Isn't it possible that God created a perfect, imperfect world that requires a level of perfection from us? And therefore the imperfect state that we find ourselves in is perfectly perfect for us to grow and turn an imperfect world into a perfect place. So he didn't like that answer, but I know that what I said was true. There's emes to that. There's emet to that. There's a very deep idea. God could give you everything. It could be so easy. You could wake up in the morning and have a credit card by your bed, and it's a black card and it says God on it, infinite credit card. You could charge whatever you want on it. Is that a bracha or a klala? No, it's for sure a klala. Why is it a klala? If I gave you everything, you have to work for anything, that would destroy you and not build you. Imagine giving that card to a kid. Yeah.
All right, but I'm stopping exactly what you're saying
Yes.
right now, and we go back to the lining of
The body and the soul.
and the soul.
Yeah.
And if you're saying if I give you that credit card, you have nothing else to do, you will have zero motivation, it's not a good thing for you.
Yeah.
What happened then? Where are the risks that we're running when we have the body aligned perfectly with the soul?
Good question. Excellent question. The question is like this. Her question is, well, I get it where right now, where there's this dichotomy, this differentiation between the body and the soul. And there's that tension is what creates the reward. But what happens when Moshiach comes and now the body and the soul are aligned? Where's the reward that happens there? It's a great question. So there is some level of bechira ultimately, but it's smaller. Much smaller than it is right now. Enough for you to be not a robot, but not enough for you to get to what you're getting right now. Do you know what I'm saying? Because ultimately, I would argue that the reason why God creates you in the way that He does, with lacking, with chisaron, is so that you could choose to be you. The circumstances that you find yourselves in are uniquely your circumstances, so that you can create your own identity. There's nothing more profound than giving a person the ability of choosing to be themselves. I'm giving you the ability of being you. That you have ownership over who you are, ownership over your reactions, ownership over how you're going to respond to the stimuli that you find yourself dealing with. That's power. That's empowering, knowing that you're in control, that no one gave this to you. All you have is your response to the situation that you're in, and that makes you who you are. What defines you is how you're going to respond right now, right here. This time in the present is what defines you. What happened, I can't change. I don't know what's going to happen in the future. I can't change the past. The only thing I have every single moment is the present right here in front of me. And how I respond to this moment in time will determine what my future looks like. That's power. That right now I can choose to focus, pay attention, or choose to be distracted. I could choose to come to a class or choose to go to Bloomingdale's and do something else. Your choice. That's your choice. Right? Your choice is to define who you are right now, who you want to be. How do I make my choices even more effective? I start creating a vision for my future. What does the best version of me look like? Who does the best me look like? Do you have a picture in your mind's eye of what it means to be the best you? Because if you don't, you're not growing. You're just responding to life. You're letting life happen as opposed to making life happen. That's what we want. God, if you're here, if you're beating, your heart is beating in your chest, you're alive and you're conscious and you're aware and you're able to walk and talk, that means you have a purpose. And I could say to you from a Jewish perspective, our purpose is to look at the situation we find ourselves in and ask ourselves, how can I be a little bit better? That's it. Every single day, a little bit better. I don't want to be the same as yesterday. If I'm making a bracha the same exact way today as I did yesterday, you're failing. If my blessing has the same exact level of kavanah, there's no upgrade in my service. If everything I'm doing is on copy paste. Today is Tuesday, okay, 12 o'clock class, copy paste, right? At the 1 o'clock, I gotta go. Like it's on rote. I'm not thinking about it. It's mechanical, right? That's not growth. It's better to show up than not showing up, 100%. But just be mindful that maintenance is not growth either, right? It's better to be here than not being here, no question about it. But I'm talking about growth. I'm talking about breaking out of your state. I say this all the time. You want shinui makom, shinui mazal. The Chachamim tell us that if you want to change your fortune, you got to change your place, right? The makom that Chachamim are talking about, the place that they're talking about, is your headspace. If you don't change this, the way you're seeing yourself in time right now, you're not changing your mazal. You got this is the space that you got to change. This is the most important space in the world because this is the space that defines who you are. You want to shinui mazal, shinui makom. You got to change your headspace. How do I change my headspace? I got to look at where I am right now and ask myself, am I on the path of growing to be the best version of myself? I'm not saying you have to arrive. I'm not saying you have to be perfect. I'm not saying you have to do everything. No one does everything. It's not about perfection. It's about getting yourselves on the journey towards greatness, the journey towards perfection. I'm working towards these things. I want more. I'm not settling for less. I want to become more. I want more. I'm interested in pushing myself to a level of greatness. I don't want to be the same. I want more. It's okay to want more. It's not okay to settle.
Sure, and who and what guides you?
Wow. I would say yes, the Torah should guide you. Yes. 100%. So listen, ultimately, you have to have a guide, right? So, for me, and I go through that. Well, I didn't grow up religious, right? So for me, that was my struggle. How do I know that that's the guide? But for me, I kind of, resolved it by going through, I believe there's a God. And if I believe there's a God, I believe that He created the world with purpose. If He created the world with purpose, that purpose has to be communicated. If it was communicated, it had to have been preserved. Where was that communication? I'm going to say Mount Sinai. Mount Sinai was the laws, the Torah itself, okay? Preservation, the rabbis. You don't like all of it? Fine. You don't start with all of it. Let's look at the first 10 on the 10 commandments. We all agree the first 10 are important, right? Everyone here will agree the 10 commandments are important. Okay, what's on there? Let's talk about Shabbat. What does Shabbat look like for you? How are you making Shabbat greater? What does your relation with your parents look like? Right? What does your relation with your family look like? Kibbud Avim. It's in the first 5. Shabbat, number 4. Kibbud Avim, number 5. Right? We'll talk about, the other ones are easy. Yeah, I'm not murdering, I'm not stealing, I'm not kidnapping. Jealousy could be a hard thing to work on, but we all agree that those are important principles. What are you doing today to work on improving those mitzvot for yourselves? Forget about everything else. It's too much. I get it. Let's pick 3 of the 10. Pick one that you own. What does it look like? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, you could go ahead and say it's too much. That's fine. I'm not saying all of it, but find something that's yours, that you own. Otherwise, you're just being lazy. It's just intellectual laziness. That's the truth. That's fine. I'm okay. I was intellectually lazy for a long time. It's hard. I get it. But if you're being honest with yourselves, forget about everything. I know it's a lot. Pick one thing that's yours, that you own. And it can't be something that you create the definition of what it looks like. Right? It's got to be something that's based on something. Our text. What does the Chumash say? What does Halacha say? It's got to come from someplace. It can't just be, I think that Shabbat. I had many years ago, I used to work at the Hillel at Brooklyn College. And we had a Israel fellow, great guy named Alex Selsky. I hope you're watching, Alex. Alex was a Russian Israeli, very proud, very Zionistic, and definitely very far from religion, even though he married a very religious woman and keeps Shabbat now. But that's not the way he was when I met him. Okay? And so when we were at our conference meeting talking about Shabbats, and I was the rabbi at the time on campus, and I was the only rabbi on campus, and there was no reform or conservative rabbi, and Hillel is a very pluralistic place. So I took every group that could have Shabbat, I owned every single Shabbat experience on campus. So they were saying it's not fair, the Orthodox rabbi is controlling what Shabbat looks like. So I said, and Alex is making this argument, so I said, Alex, I'm like, there is only one experience for Shabbat, and it's the right way to do it, and that's the way I'm doing it. You can't make up what your Shabbat experience looks like. So that's ridiculous. Of course, for me, he says, Shabbat is, bringing my family together, having a meal, and going to the beach or watching TV together. That's what Shabbat is for me. I'm like, who says that's what Shabbat is? That's not what Shabbat is. I said, you know what, for me? I said, Yom HaTzmaut for me is making parties and going to the disco. He's like, no, you can't do that. I said, well, why not? You're saying it's all relative to my own personal experience. Why can I make disco parties on Yom HaTzmaut? Because Yom HaTzmaut is a day of sadness. I said, who said so? It's a day of sadness, a day of remembering. He says, because that's what we do. I'm like, I know. I'm telling you, for 3,300 years, we've been keeping Shabbat in a very particular kind of way. It's not subjective. It's not arbitrary. There's very clear rules of what makes Shabbat Shabbat. You're not ready for all of it? Fine. I get it. Don't do all of it. But at least know what they are and know what you're not doing, and then work towards doing something. It can't just be, it doesn't feel right. That's not Judaism anymore. That's other religions. We're the people of the book, which means that we have to use our heads. We have to be philosophical about it. We have to be rational about it. What does Shabbat look like? How do I get to that conclusion? How do I understand it? Am I working on understanding it? If it's exactly the same Shabbat every week, you're doing something wrong. You're doing it wrong for you, for your family. We can be more. Right? Mashiach is about wanting to achieve a higher state of consciousness. So when we're talking about the personalities, Yehuda, Tamar, Batsheva, talking about the relationships with David, talking about Lot and his daughters, we're talking about people that somehow are tied to this higher level of consciousness. That ultimately all these people were drawing us to a time in history where we have a deeper understanding of what is right versus what is wrong. Right? And this is exactly what I believe the Ramchal is going to allude to a little bit later. Listen to what he says over here. He says, God's purpose in creation was to bestow of his good to another. Period. Let me explain what that means. God creates the world to give you tov, to give you good. Right? We're in source number 2. What does that mean? What is the greatest good that you could possibly get from God? The greatest good you can get is God. If God is the source of all good, then the greatest good that you can possibly have is Hashem ba'atzmo, is God himself. That is the greatest good. Right? He wants to give you his greatest good. His wisdom therefore decreed that the nature of the true benefaction of his giving created things, the opportunity to attach themselves to him to the greatest degree possible for them. God's wisdom, however, decreed that for such good to be perfect, the one enjoying it must be its master, which means you got to choose. That is, he must earn it for himself. Man must earn his perfection through his own free will and desire. It was necessary, therefore, for man to be given free will, to be balanced between good and evil, and not be compelled towards either, which means you're ambivalent. You're agnostic when it comes to your choices. You have to have that clear slate to choose between doing what's right versus doing what's not so right. Okay? In that state, you can choose to be a greater person, have a greater attachment, and so on and so forth. In order that God's goal be best achieved, the highest wisdom decreed that man should consist of 2 opposites. These are his pure spiritual soul and his unenlightened physical body. Each one is drawn towards its nature, so that the body inclines towards the material, while the soul leans towards the spiritual. The 2 are then in constant battle. If the soul prevails, it not only elevates itself, but the body as well. And the individual thereby attains his destined perfection. That is what we want. This is the Ramchal. The Ramchal wrote this 1700s, talking about almost 300 years ago in Italy. He was a fascinating person. Most people have the wrong picture of him. If Ramchal was alive today, you would meet him. He'd be clean shaven. He would have a beautiful red cape on and wearing Renaissance clothing. He was a very interesting person. He was also, some people will credit him as being the father of modern Hebrew. He wrote plays in Hebrew. People don't know this about him, right? He wrote plays in Hebrew. No one was writing plays, not talking about Jewish plays, just like secular plays. He was a genius. He was a writer. He wrote all of his books before his 24th birthday. Okay? His books are the most important books written today, as far as Hashkafa goes. He died at the age of 39. Okay, died at the age of 39. His wife, and he made Aliyah. Okay, moved to Israel, lived in Tiberia. His wife and 2 children died. He watched them die in plague in Israel. Okay, he died poor with nothing, alone. He's buried next to Rabbi Akiva, right next to Rabbi Akiva. So you have Rabbi Akiva buried there, and you have the Ramchal buried there. The reason why they buried him there is because he believed that he was a reincarnation of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva became religious when he was 40. The Ramchal died when he was 39. And these are 2 people that created a new narrative of Torah learning for the world so that they could take these ideas and allow Judaism to preserve and have a new ability to express Judaism in a way that was meaningful and tangible for the generations that came after them. Ramban says, number 3, that in the days of Mashiach, a person will not have a desire for evil, rather he will naturally do what is right. And therefore there will be no merit and no demerit for his actions, because merit and demerit are a function of desire. So according to the Ramban, Nachmanides, 13th century, Spain, okay, he believed that no, once Moshiach comes, that that's it. You're stuck in this reality of no merit, no loss of merit. You are just a perfect you. However, the Shem Shmuel, 18th century, this arises fundamental questions, since there will be no opportunity to earn reward once Mashiach era begins, and yet the time for receiving reward for the mitzvot we do today will also will not have arrived, since the world to come is another stage after the Messianic Era. What then is the point of the era of Mashiach, since it is neither a time to earn nor a time to receive the reward? You understand his question? That's a very good question. That's your question. Okay? So Reb Nosson Wise says as follows. He says, we need a little background to fully appreciate the oddity of considering the coming of Mashiach fundamental to Jewish faith. Judaism does not subscribe to the belief that man can be redeemed or saved by anyone, including God. Okay? Meaning we don't believe in that. That's Christianity. But God put us in this world to redeem ourselves by exercising our own free will and choosing good. Top of page 3. And rejecting the evil. You're on page 3 if it says 6 and 7 on the side. The whole point of our existence in this world is that the conditions prevailing here make it a suitable environment for human independence. God's presence is not manifest here. Consequently, we are able to choose freely without being overwhelmed by its oppressive weight and earn our reward in the world to come by perfecting ourselves through our own efforts. By the way, according to Jewish thought, the arrival of Mashiach has nothing to do with the world to come or with the concept of reward. The maxim, mitzvot cannot be rewarded in this world, Gemara and Kedushin, applies to the days of Mashiach as it applies to any other historical era in the world. Let me explain. When we say in the Torah that if you honor your parents, you will be rewarded with a long life, we don't mean that means in this world. There's no way to convert spiritual actions into material things. And therefore, when we're talking about spiritual reward, we're talking about in a spiritual realm, not in a physical realm. So whenever the Torah gives you a baracha to do something, that merit is not executed here. It's not meted out here. It's on a different spiritual plane. Okay? So all those mitzvot that we do cannot be transcribed into anything that is in our lifetimes. It's outside of our time. There's a whole other reality of existence that you're going to experience. A whole other world of truth that, God willing, you will all experience after 120 years, once you've lived and you died. Okay? In that awakening, in this new spiritual plane, that is where you're able to receive the merits for those actions. But it's not here.
And the merits is according to the highest level of where your Shabbat will go?
It's hard for me to, I can't speak about things that I don't fully understand. But the way I understand it is that your reward has nothing to do with has nothing to do with how you do what you do. It has to do with where you're coming from and doing what you're doing. So you and I could be doing exactly the same thing, but for you it could be 10,000 times more valuable than me doing it because of where you're coming from versus where I'm coming from. You understand that? So two people could be doing the same action, same blessing, same Shabbat, but the reward is completely different depending on where they're coming from. Their backgrounds determine the reward.
Does that have to do with Batsheva?
It doesn't have to be. It can.
Do you mean the reward of your ancestors?
No. Your reward, your action.
My actions are based on my ancestors, like you're saying.
Well, so I guess, so that my kids, for example, for them, they grew up in a home where I hope they learned to appreciate Shabbat. And Shabbat was taught in a very clear, understandable kind of way, very tangible. I didn't grow up with that. So for me, Shabbat observance is a little bit more difficult than it is for my kids. So because it's more challenging for me, even though we're both keeping Shabbat, my reward is somewhat, I don't want to say greater, but different certainly than theirs, because their challenge is they're not being challenged the same way. And therefore we say, Lefum tzara agra, according to the pain is the reward. The more the challenge that you have in doing a particular commandment, the greater the reward is for that person. And there's no way to know what that challenge is for that person. Only that person knows, right? So don't look at what other people are doing, what they have. Know that what you are working on overcoming is what will enable you to get the reward. If you're not working on overcoming anything, there's no reward. Ready? The right thing and the hard thing are usually the same. The right thing and the hard thing are usually the same. Meaning, if you want to know what's right to do, generally speaking, the more difficult choice is generally the right approach than the easy approach. Why is that? Because when we do what's easy, we're not being challenged to grow. And if we're put in a situation where we have a choice to do something that is more difficult versus something that is easy, that effort usually translates into something that allows you to become something more. And you're put in that scenario to choose more. The reason why we don't like choosing more is because we're afraid. I don't want to be different. I don't want to lose myself. I don't want to lose my identity. I'm scared of becoming something else. Well, like when, or expressed most clearly to me by my mother, is you're becoming a religious fanatic. Ma, I'm going to synagogue. You're a religious fanatic. Right? It's just the way it is. It's fanaticism. How could you go every single day? Right? It's crazy. What are you doing every single day? Because you're a fanatic, right? So am I a fanatic? No. I don't think so. Right? I don't think I am. Thank you. I'm not. Again, it's the idea is like you know what I'm saying. Like it's getting yourself to a place. The fear of when you became, for me, the fear of becoming someone who was more observant was, what are my friends going to think about me? What's my family going to say? You're not touching girls. You know how hard it was. You know how hard it was for me to explain to my aunts that I was shomer negia, that I'm not giving them hugs anymore. I love my aunts. They were so insulted. So and it wasn't too long ago where they're like, listen, they're like, we're all menopause right now. Give us hugs. I'm like, this has nothing to do with menopause. I'm like, you're missing the point. That's not why. That's not what it is. It's a sensitivity that I'm working on for me. So don't worry about it. We're not thinking. I'm like, this is not a question of thinking. It was just like a total like disconnect in like what they thought I was doing and why I was doing it. You know, and every single time till now, and I've been doing this for like 26 years already. It's still an issue every single time I see them. Right? So like whatever. Thank God, it is what it is. But like that's the challenge. It's not a challenge for my kids. Right, because they grew up in an environment where that's the norm, right? It's just different. It's fine. I'm not saying one's better. I'm just saying they're different, right? And I'm not saying that people that are not doing it are better than the people that are. We're different, coming from different places. I don't care about what everyone else is doing. I care about the individual and asking the individual, what are they doing to grow? What's your thing that you're owning? The stories that we read about are people, or all people, that own something. We're talking about a spiritual choice that they had to make, the decisions they made in their lives between the hard thing and the right thing. The Lot's daughter is a great example. We spoke about that a lot last week, right? I mean, having incest with your father to preserve humanity, how many of us are willing to do that? Is it the right thing, the hard thing? You know, they're rewarded. Something profound about that leads us to a Messianic time. David and Batsheva, I would say that even though it's so easy to assume that David is the villain in that story, and I understand why, but I think that he was doing what he thought was right, and it was hard. And he owned his mistakes when he made them. And that's what it means to be someone who is a spiritually growing person. Yehuda and Tamar owned their mistake. They owned it. Ruth, how hard was it for her to be so consistent, doing exactly what her mother-in-law was telling her to do, without her losing her own mind? That level of servitude and consistency. That's why we're reading these people. Their stories are profound. Lessons about what it allows us to get to a place of Moshiach. That's what this is. Not just random stories. It's so easy to see the scandal of it and stop there. But when you kind of like pull yourself back and look at the bigger picture as to what's actually going on over here, the stories are about individuals who had to make really hard choices. They're not easy choices, and I don't want to be tested. I don't want to be tested in those ways. You see the same thing with Josef and Potiphar, Potiphar's wife. Horrible circumstance to be in, but Josef was literally this close to getting it all wrong. Chachamim say he was naked, undressed. They were on top of each other. They were ready to go all the way.
So his father.
Right, and he had a vision of his father, and he stopped. He pulled himself away, and he ran out. That's why he didn't have his clothing on, because he took him off. Right. We're talking about that's how close. And that's not an easy, that's why it's called Yosef at Tzaddik. That's not an easy place to come out of. That's like very, very far gone already. But yet he recognized he was about to make a mistake. He does not allow his past choice to define him, and he elevates himself to becoming something more. He's not tethered. He doesn't not bothered by it. We don't even talk about it anymore. He made a mistake, we moved on. I'm not that person. That's not who I am. That's not who I want to be. I want to be something more. Yehuda and Tamar, that's not who he wants to be. I don't want to be the guy who's fooling around with prostitutes. I didn't realize what was going on here, but I am taking ownership. I made a mistake. I am owning that mistake because I want to be more. I'm leaning into my identity and who I am. I'm accepting the fact that this is where I come from and this is where my circumstances. I'm leaning into it. It's okay. But that's not going to hold me back from being the best me that I could possibly be. This is what Moshiach is supposed to be teaching us. Why? Because ultimately we believe that we want a connection to the ultimate good. The ultimate good is the divine.
I see them as a mistakes, all these things, because they are very holy things before. And then I have a prophecy. I think everything has been done and mastermind by God.
No, so
Not everything what happens.
yes, we are going to say that ultimately God is an orchestrator. He created the circumstances, but they didn't have to make those choices. Each story is a circumstance where a person could have made a different choice. Now, if you're going to say they had no choice, then there's no reward. There's nothing special what they did. So it means that the stories that we are reading about these people, yes, God orchestrated the circumstance, but their choices is what made them great. How they chose in those circumstances is what made them great. You know what I'm saying?
I don't think they have the choice.
You don't think they had the choice?
I don't think so.
Okay.
They are prophesied and doing it.
No, we can't. I can't accept that. If there was no choice, then there's nothing special about them. They're just robots.
But there is a choice.
Oh, you have to make up your mind. Yeah.
There are choice.
Yeah.
We say that what we can plan whatever we want. But
Right.
Hashem is the one in the end who gives you the plans for us. So in order to get to whatever we got today,
Yeah.
whatever it happened, the Moshiach when it comes
Yeah.
down and everything have been in that point to make that choice in order to get what we
So
got.
you're saying that, but what you're really saying is that if I do nothing, it'll happen on its own.
When we choose something,
Yes.
we don't say it's our own choice. We do the choice. Yeah, but Hashem is giving us that choice to do.
But that's exactly what he's saying.
Yeah.
He said you're given a choice to do evil or to good.
There has to be both. There has to be both. It can't just be one. The choice means I have to be able to choose to do what is right and what is wrong. If the circumstance presents itself where I could only choose right, there's nothing special about that circumstance.
But even if it was wrong, whatever they did, good things happen to us, for the benefit.
Oh, because we don't believe.
For the benefit of Am Yisrael.
Yes, that's true. That we say even in the bad. She's saying even if bad happens, like the destruction of the temple, ultimately has a positive effect because the Jews weren't decimated completely; they were just sent to exile and they could rebuild. And therefore, there's a concept within Judaism that even that which is bad has some good to it. True, I can't argue with that. I agree with that, but I don't think that. I just want to be clear that, like, if we can't say that even if these people made the wrong choices, they were the right choices. Do you know what I'm saying? That's my only concern with what I'm hearing you say. Like, I can't accept that the wrong choices were the right choices. The wrong choices have to be wrong and have to be punishable. The right choices could only be rewarded if they chose to overcome something that was challenging. If they did not overcome the challenge, there's no reward. Period. Justice. That has to be. That's the system.
But it was not a challenge for them. It was something normal to do.
Oh.
I mean, if you take, for example, the children of
Lot.
Lot.
Yeah.
They did good things because it was an ancestor. It was not an ancestor by desire or lust. It was something that they wanted to serve the world.
I don't know about you, but if I was in that situation, I don't think I could do it.
I don't.
I don't think I could do it. It doesn't matter what's it called. The bottom line is that you're right. Was it a difficult situation? I think most people, 99% of people in that circumstance would not do it. You know what my response would be? Not my problem, God's problem. Let him figure it out. I'm not doing this. It's usher. It's against the law. Why would I take responsibility here? I'm not doing it. That would be my response.
Maybe for them it wasn't against the law.
No, it was against the law for them. No, it was against the law for them. Incest was incest. There was no one was allowed to have relations with their father. No one married their father.
That's what was happening in Sodom.
Yeah.
So maybe.
But they were different than the Sodomites, right? They were different. Even Lot had a different set of moral principles that he raised his family with than the Sodomites. And he was actually there. Lot was there to do outreach. He was there to try to do kiruv. He was there to try to help the Sodomites. And unfortunately, he got impacted by his environment, but not to a place where he was okay with it. That's why. Otherwise, why did they have to get him drunk? Why didn't he just let's just do this? Let's just get it. Let's just go. It's normal, right? That's not what happened. He was aware of what they were attempting to do, but and this is, we're not saying that everything was 100% perfect, that this is, they're heroes. There is a complication in this act. On the one hand, we see how there's something valiant about their effort to preserve humanity, but there's also something very crum about the way in which they name their children. There's a lack of tzniut about it. And the same is true with Lot. Lot was cognizant of what they were attempting to do and didn't stop them. But he felt somewhat, conflicted about the circumstance he found himself in. Like any man should. Yeah, they all agreed. What?
How did you end your sentence?
I said that any man in that situation would be conflicted. No one wants to have an intimate relation with their daughter. You know what I'm saying? No. And so on the one hand,
More than conflicted.
yeah, I'm 100. Yeah, I'm saying, I'm saying, I yes, 100%. That's my point. Yeah, that's my point. Okay, let's keep going. Let's see if we can finish this today. I think this is the last class in the series.
Is it today?
I think so. No, we have one more. I'm not sure if this is the last class. I could keep going. I think this is the last class of this series. Then I think then the next week there's a 3-week series that I'm doing on getting to know yourself better than the devil knows you, and it's a whole class on just doing hitbodedut and just working on meditating on getting a deeper understanding of who you are in preparation for the high holidays. What's that? Tuesday, 12 o'clock. Yes. Same place, same time, just different topic. That's all. Okay, so so that's why I want to try to finish this. I don't have much time. I only have 5 minutes. Yeah. So the Ramchal says as follows. Did I read this one? Are we at the 7? 7? 6. When Adam he was composed of two equal opposites, the body and the soul. His environment contained both good and evil, and he was balanced between the two to choose whatever he wished. The appropriate thing for him was to have done would have been to choose the good. Had he done so, his soul would have overcome his body, and the spiritual would have dominated the physical. He would then have immediately attained perfection, and it would have remained with him forever. However, when Adam sinned, things were changed greatly. By virtue of his sin, he caused evil to increase both in himself and in all of creation. It subsequently became harder for him to reach perfection than it had been before. This is the state that we're in. We believe that we're in a lower state as a result of Adam's sin. And what we're trying to accomplish with the Torah and its mitzvot is undoing the sin of Adam. Rabbi Dessler says, before his transgression, Adam was on the level of living in Gan Eden, which was, as we have explained elsewhere, a state of awareness of the reality that creation is spiritual and that physicality is a mere clothing that hides the true nature of reality. He literally received his life sustenance from the spiritual world without any of the obfuscation of the physical of the sages say, right? There was nothing held back from him. Angels would roast meat and pour wine up for him. But when Adam sinned, he brought the evil inclination into his being and brought the world down into the state of spiritual obscurity, wherein it appears as if the physicality is the true nature of existence. So he created a world where, when it says that he realized he was naked. We spoke about this last summer. Remember what we said? He didn't know he was naked before? Right? Of course he knew he was naked. But the difference is that when Adam looked in the mirror, he now identified with his physical body as part of his identity. Before the sin, the body was just a spacesuit for his soul. Like a spaceman in space does not see the spacesuit as being part of his identity. He understands it's something he takes off and walks away from. Adam understood this about his body. Okay, but after he ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, he was confused, and now he started identifying more with the body. By virtue of his sin, he caused evil to... But when Adam sinned, he brought evil inclinations to his being and brought the world down into a state of spiritual obscurity where it appears as if the physicality of the nature, physicality is the true nature of existence. Such is the curse he received. By the sweat of your brow shall you eat bread. That is, he entered into the world that hides behind nature, cause and effect, a world that hides the hand of God beneath the veil of physicality. We don't see God in existence. All we see is the physical world. Therefore, it's so hard to connect to God in a spiritual plane because all we're doing all day is holding on to physical things. I eat physically, I sleep physically, everything I do is physical, and therefore it's so easy to identify with the physical nature of my identity. When in reality, you have another identity that's called spiritual soul. That part of you is different. In order to relate to that, in order to have a soul with a body, you need to be working on developing a connection to your soul, a relationship with your neshama. How do you do it? Well, you could do it through diet, right? Kosher. You could do it through Shabbat. You could do it through prayer, through chesed. You could do it through learning, come to classes. You could do it through there's so many different ways of doing it. But the easiest way is just pick one thing that you own, that's yours, that you can call your own, something that you understand, something that you've learned about, something that is concretely yours, and work on owning that thing. It could be a midah, it could be patience, it could be savlanut, it could be kavod, it could be hakarat hatov. We're doing Monday nights. Pick something that you're going to own this year that allows you to connect to your spiritual side. That's not just a physical thing, right? Not just I'm going to make my blessings on food better. Nice thing, but try to pick something that's less physical, less tangible, something more spiritual, so you could ignite a connection to your spiritual self. I want to finish with the following. What's that? It's not a full-time job. It's 5 minutes a day. 5 minutes a day. You don't have to go to shul every single day. I do, right? You don't have to wake up an extra 45 minutes for selichot in the morning. Although you're all welcome to join us. There are women that come in the morning, 6:45. If you want to join us for selichot, no thanks. All right, it's beautiful. What's that? You do it. Amazing, beautiful.
I'm not talking about all the time. It's prayers. It's all day long. You have to pray. You have to have a note for the brachot.
Yeah, we do. Well, why is it all day long? Why? Because it's so easy to forget. It's so easy to forget that you're spiritual because you're so involved in so much gashmiyut of physicality. It's so easy. So you have a system that allows you to connect to the spiritual side. It's everywhere. It's all day. It's every minute. It's an opportunity. But that's all it is. I'm not, God forbid, don't get me wrong, I'm a very big believer in enjoying a good steak. I'm a very big believer in going and taking a nice vacation and going on a beautiful hike and wearing nice clothing and partying and having fun. I'm not saying you shouldn't do those things. Do those things. Have fun. Enjoy everything the world has to offer. But not at the expense of losing what you truly are. That's my point. Moshiach, and I think we're going to end with this. You guys could please go through the source on your own. Finish it off. It's a very easy read. It's very clear. Moshiach is a time where we're supposed to get this intellectual clarity about the choices that we could have, should have made. The people that we learned about over the last 7-8 weeks were individuals that were put into circumstances that were very difficult. I imagine that if we were put in those same circumstances, we would not have chose those things. Mashiach is about us wanting to get to a place where we have clarity. I don't want the suffering. I don't want the lack of clarity. I want to know 100% there's a God. I don't want to have doubt about whether or not the Torah is true. I don't want to have a doubt about whether or not the rabbis, what they're saying is true. I want to know 100%. I want to know that what I'm doing is right. That level of validation, clarity, is what we're aiming for through our actions, and hopefully in a time, in an era where everything is completely erased. No more uncertainty, no more doubt, no more sickness, no more depression, right? We live in a world where you have wolf and lamb walking side by side. Even the animals will have a level of clarity. We all become, herbivores. No more. We live in a different state. That's what we're aiming for. We talk about building the Beit HaMikdash. It's not because we want to build a house for the sake of building a house. We want to build a place that represents Ir Shalom, a city of peace. We could live in shalom, shalom with our guf, shalom with our neshama, shalom with the people around us. That's what we want. But we know that the only way to get there is through fighting to become greater people. A strong future comes from strong individuals that fought very hard to become more. A weak future comes from individuals that were lazy and did nothing. You choose. Have an amazing week, and Bezrat Hashem, we will see you all next week. Thank you so much for listening.